Okay, so for this lesson, we're going to be working on 5.5 Part 2. We're going to be looking at some more formulas. We're going to be looking at the half angle formulas, the product to sum formulas, and the sum to product formulas. Now, these again are all on your formula sheet, so you can get that out to use that as a reference. I would definitely recommend that so you can see exactly where they are on the formula sheet. So we're going to start with some half angle formulas, and these are formulas that help us take angles that are not on the unit circle and kind of convert them into angles that are, so we can find exact values. So remember, again, an exact value means a fraction. So we don't want to use our calculator to give us decimals. So we want to use these formulas as these will give us what the fractions are. So let's take a look at number 1. We're going to find the sine of 105 degrees. Now that's an angle that's not on our unit circle, but I could write this as 210 over 2. 210 is on the unit circle. So if I know that, what I can do is use this formula right here to plug into. So I'm just going to follow the directions, and 210 is going to be u because that's u over 2. 210 over 2 is the same thing as 105. So the only extra thing that we have to consider is this plus or minus out in front. That comes from what quadrant we're working in. Now 105 is in the second quadrant. So from what we know, all students take calculus. In the second quadrant, sine is positive. So my answer is going to be positive. So I'm just going to plug in the square root of 1 minus cosine of u, which u is 210, over 2. Now we just have to figure out what the cosine of 210 is. So I'm going to use my formula, my unit circle. 210 is right here. Cosine is negative root 3 over 2. And that really turns it into a plus now since it was negative over 2. And you can leave your answer just like this. The only really other thing you could do to simplify that is to write that as 2 plus root 3 over 4 by getting rid of that fraction inside the fraction. Okay, so a great way to check. Make sure you're in degree mode on your calculator. You would type in the sine of 105, get your decimal, and then type in the answer we just got. So we got the square root of, and I'm going to use a fraction for this one, 1 plus root 3 over 2 divided by 2, and I get the same decimal. Okay, so let's try number 2. Find all solutions of 2 minus sine squared equals 2 cosine squared of x over 2 in the interval from 0 to 2 pi. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use some formulas here. First off, I have a half angle formula, so I'm going to plug in for that. That half angle formula is, for cosine, the square root of 1 plus cosine over 2 squared. Now, when I square a positive or a negative, either one becomes positive. And when I square a root, they just cancel out. So this is 2 minus sine squared equals 2, and the 2 can cancel with this denominator here. So I'm really just left with 1 plus cosine. Now, what we also learned when we solve trig equations is that we want to get one trig function when we solve these. So I'm going to convert this sine squared to 1 minus cosine squared. Now that's one of our Pythagorean identities. Okay, so next I'm going to simplify here. So this is 2 minus 1, so that's 1, and then plus cosine squared. The 1's now cancel. I'm left with cosine squared minus cosine, if I move everything to one side, equals 0. Now I can factor out a cosine. And just like we solved trig equations, I'm going to set both of these equal to 0 and solve. So over here I get cosine equals 0, and over here cosine equals 1. So now I'm going to use my formula, my unit circle, and see where cosine equals 0. So that's your x, right? So that would be pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. And where cosine equals 1, that would be at 0. So I'm going to list those. X equals pi over 2, 3 pi over 2, and 0. Okay, so let's try a couple other types of formulas. Here we have a product to sum formula. So this takes a product and it converts it to a sum. All you have to do is be able to match up which formula you're using. So if you look at number 3, we have a cosine and then a sine. So I'm going to find the formula that has a cosine and then a sine. I'm going to label cosine as the u, sine as the v. And now I'm just going to plug right into this formula. So this is equal to 1/2 sine of u plus v minus sine of u minus v. And then I'm going to simplify just a little bit. So this is 1/2 sine of 9x minus sine of x. Now, since we don't know what x is, there's really nothing else we can do here. These are not like terms, so we can't combine them. So that's as far as we can go. So we just took a product and we wrote it as a sum of two trig functions. Okay, we can also go the other way. So we can take sums and write them as products. So let's do that with number 4. Okay, so here we have a sum and we want to turn it into a product. So I'm going to label this. I'm going to find the one that I need first. So I have a cosine plus a cosine. So I'm going to use the first one here. Oh, sorry, not the first one, the second one. So that means 195 is the u and 105 is the v. And I'm just going to plug right into this formula here. So 2 cosine of u plus v over 2 cosine of u minus v over 2. And let's simplify. So 195 plus 105 is 300. Divided by 2 is 150. $195 minus 105 gives us 90. Divided by 2 is 45. Now those angles are angles that I recognize. Those are both on the unit circle. Cosine of 150 is negative root 3 over 2. Cosine of 45 is root 2 over 2. So now I can solve this. This simplifies to negative root 6 over 2. So I found an exact value. This is not a decimal. And I used a formula to help me do this. Now again, you can check your work. Just type in cosine, type in the original, cosine of 195 plus cosine of 105. You get a decimal. Now type in the negative root 6 divided by 2. We should get the same decimal. And that's proof that you did your work right. Okay, last question, number 5. Find all solutions of sine of 5x plus sine of 3x equals 0 in the interval from 0 to 2 pi. So I'm looking at this and I see that I have a sum. So I could use my sum to product formula. That will help me combine these, hopefully making it easier to solve. Because right now I don't know what to do to get sine by itself because I have 2 of them and they're not like terms. So I'm going to use my sum to product formula. I'm going to look for the right one. So I'm looking for a formula that is adding 2 signs together. So that would be this first one up at the top here. So u is 5x and v is 3x. So I'm going to plug right into this formula here. So it's 2 sine of u plus v, so 5x plus 3x over 2, cosine of u minus v, 5x minus 3x over 2, and we're going to set that equal to 0. Okay, so let's simplify this. This is 5x plus 3x is 8x over 2, so 4x. This is 5x minus 3x, so 2x over 2 is x. Okay, I can divide by the 2. That's sine of 4x cosine of x equals 0. So now I've got something that has been factored. I've got a product, so now I can just go straight to setting both parts equal to 0 and solving. I'm going to start over here with the cosine. So on my unit circle, cosine is equal to 0. If I dig out my unit circle here, so the x value is equal to 0 at pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. So I'm going to write those down. Okay, then sine of 4x. So first I want to find where sine is equal to 0. So sine is equal to 0 at 0 and pi. So I'm going to write those down, but that's 4x. So really what I have to do is continue to solve for x. So that would give me, if I divide both of my answers by 4, 0 and pi over 4. So I've got these two answers and I've got these two answers. Okay, so that concludes our lesson on using these formulas. We're going to keep working through that formula sheet, so by the end of this unit, you'll have all of the formulas and you'll know how to use all of them.